I'm Fatheree.
This is Dave.
This is Brian.
And this is Tex-Trek.
Engage.
So welcome back aboard the Starship Texas for the 74th installment of the Tex-Trek podcast, the home of Star Trek fandom from deep in the heart of Texas. And tonight we are talking about Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country, the final movie of the original series crew.
Well, the final all original series crew movie.
We should let him get the 74-47 thing out of his system at the front end.
I didn't even think about that. But yes, this is the 74th episode, so it is the inverse of 47. My favorite number in the magic number of Star Trek. Thank you, Brian, for catching that, because I would have not been able to forgive myself if I didn't point that out.
You know who else has favorite numbers? People who have crystals and stuff.
I don't think it has any actual properties other than I just enjoy seeing that number because of its connection to Star Trek.
It's like they're waving hi to you every time they do it. They're doing this to you.
Yeah.
But enough about 47 or 74. We're going to talk about number 6.
Yep.
As in the sixth film. It came out in 1991, so it's been 28 years. And this is a fan favorite.
Among usually in the top 2 or 3, I would say, for a lot of people.
Yeah, especially if you're looking at the TOS movies, 2, 4, and 6 are the ones that come up the most. 1 has made a resurgence, and there's some diehard 3 lovers like myself, but
I'm waiting for Insurrection to get its moment.
Man, that's stranger things have happened. But,
I hear people talking about how great Episode 1 of Star Wars is, so anything can happen in this day and age.
Yeah, that's true. With this movie, it was made with the intent of being the finale for the original series cast. And this was the first Star Trek movie since the motion picture that producer Harv Bennett, was not involved in. He actually had his own idea for how to follow up Star Trek V. A big concern was the budget after the disappointing results of Star Trek V. Paramount didn't want to spend too much money. Harv Bennett came up with this idea to save money by not bringing back the principal actors and instead doing a prequel that would have showed a young Kirk meeting a young Spock. Similar territory to what Star Trek 09 would eventually cover. We'll get to that movie at some point, but the actors were actually mad when they heard about this, and so they were trying to stir the pot and get the fans mad because the actors, they're like, no, I want you to bring me back for a movie, but you got to pay me enough to come back. So you had these actors going to conventions saying Paramount wants to recast us all as teenagers at the Academy and not use any of us, and isn't that terrible? And they're trying to rile up the fan base.
Probably try to get them to go on Twitter and other social media.
If I thought the alternative was my final film was going to be Star Trek V, I'd be pretty motivated to.
Yeah, but eventually Paramount decided to not go that route. But Harv Bennett did part ways from the Star Trek franchise. He left us with 3 really great movies, though, and then 1 not so great movie. But
who was the producer on this?
Nimoy.
Well, Nimoy kind of took over the Harv Bennett role, and Nimoy he came up with a story. Basically, the Cold War is ending in real life. What if we had the Cold War end in Star Trek? and do a Berlin Wall coming down in space.
Right, with a very dramatic kind of like rescue mission sort of thing that did not quite... That's their exaggerated version of the reality.
Yeah, with a Sherlock Holmes-style mystery thrown in there, some quotes from classic literature, all the Nicolas Meyer trappings.
Well, I think Nicolas Meyer's probably brought those, not
yeah,
Nimoy.
Well, yeah, I was gonna say that like Nicolas Meyer, comes in with Nimoy, and the way I imagine this conversation going is Nicolas Meyer, Leonard Nimoy go to Paramount, and they're like, "Look, we made the good Star Trek movies, so let us do this one. We can end the series for you." And Paramount didn't give them like too huge of a budget.
Basically the same budget as Star Trek V, which doesn't account for inflation, and they had to fight hard to get that.
Yes. But
Trek 2 was kind of a lower budget movie overall, too.
And none of them were really high except for the motion picture. Like Paramount did not want to have another motion picture on their hands where they overspend on Star Trek. But they did have certain stipulations with this budget. They really wanted the special effects to look good. They wanted the ships and the space battles to look good, and it does show in the movie. I think some of the ship shots in this movie hold up perfectly well to today,
which did mean that they didn't have enough a lot of money for everything else because they were trying to make sure they paid ILM.
But
so a little more budgeting on like what Rurapente and things like that.
Yeah. Yeah. But the battle at the end of this movie that we'll get to, it is like one of the best special effect sequences in the Star Trek movies, I think.
Yeah, Nicolas Myers knows how to stretch a dollar. And that was why he was brought in, because they weren't going to get very many dollars. So Nimoy said, well, Nicolas Myers is our man then.
And I said a few weeks ago when we talked about Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan, any Star Trek movie that had Nimoy, Nicolas Meyer, Harve Bennett, any movie that had two of those three working on it behind the scenes was a damn good Star Trek movie.
Yes.
That does exclude the motion picture in Star Trek V, but that's how they worked out for me, at least. So.
I think I'm the person who least likes Star Trek VI in the world.
Out of people who I know, but yeah, Dave has some issues on this, so we're not just going to be gushing on this movie the entire time. Dave's going to be calling out some of the things that rubs him the wrong way.
Dumb shit.
This was the first Star Trek movie I got to see as a big, long-time fan. By that point, I was an expert. I'd been watching every episode of TNG. I had been following. I was subscribed to the newsletter. I was cosplaying. And this was a gloriously fun movie, though I kind of spoiled myself by watching too many 25th anniversary documentaries before going in to see it, which had too many behind-the-scenes details.
You connected the dots that in the pre-internet, or was the internet around then?
Not for most people.
Not for most people.
In the pre-internet days, they didn't expect people to connect those dots, but you saw enough to do it.
Yeah, and
you were pretty dedicated.
I have to admit, I somewhat spoiled myself for this film, but I do really love this film, and I loved it when I first saw it, and I loved it ever since.
Yeah, and I guess my initial experience was I saw it on VHS as a kid in 1994, I believe. I've told the story before. Basically, I rented Star Treks 2, 3, and 4. Watched those in one weekend. Next weekend, I rented Star Treks 5 and 6 and watched those. So these movies that I love that had like a big impact on my childhood, like I basically experienced them within the course of a week. But
wow,
that's interesting.
More like a mini series for you.
I saw that. I know I saw it when it came out, but I don't have particularly strong memories of seeing it, other than I kind of vaguely remember being disappointed. Yeah. And I think part of it was also like. That was hit me right in the college days when I was like, I think I had like somewhat burned out on Trek based really sort of on never quite plugging fully into Next Generation. And Trek 5, I'm sure, had dealt a bit of a blow to what I expected from Trek. And then, I was probably a little bit of a snarky college student, a little more critical of some of that stuff than I might have been before. So, for whatever, for reasons that we'll talk about, it felt disappointing to me. I think also Trek 2 loomed so large in my childhood that I think the fact that to some degree, if I were to just sum up why it doesn't quite connect, it's I feel like the dialogue doesn't have the gravity of Trek 2, that there's so much kind of humor and lines that don't quite have that perfection that Trek 2 has. that I love the premise of this movie, and I feel like the execution never quite or rarely quite lives up to it for me. So it's probably a better movie than I give it credit for, but it was more disappointing to me on a personal level.
After Star Trek V, I wasn't disappointed.
Yeah, which was kind of how I felt watching this, because I watched Star Trek V as a kid, and I was like, well, that was really weird. So I ejected that tape, put in Star Trek VI, and I was like, oh, this one is way better.
I think at the time I was probably a little bit ready to let Trek go, actually. My fandom wasn't so deep that I was like, I will ride this forever.
Yeah.
Well, it was kind of a movie about letting go, though. It was supposed to be the big ending movie, so...
Yeah, but that didn't mean I'd have to like it.
I will grant you, there's a lot of on-the-nose beats in this film. That you mentioned that on the nose when we watched it together, I think, and I agree with you, and that is the single biggest complaint I have about this movie is when it fumbles, it's because it's too on the nose about little beats, about how it executes the beat. So,
Fatheree, we want to hit up the... Transwarp summary?
Yeah, we're just going to very quickly run through the story of this movie just to refresh everyone out there. So we will initiate the Transwarp summary. The longtime Cold War enemies of the Federation, the Klingon Empire, experience an explosion on their home world's moon, Praxis, caused by the overmining of dilithium and lack of safety oversight. This is essentially their Chernobyl. This sets off a chain of events and a story designed to resemble the Berlin Wall coming down, but in space. Kirk, who hates Klingons after they murdered his son 3 movies earlier, is charged with taking the Enterprise to rendezvous with Klingon Chancellor Gorkon and escorting him back into the Federation for peace talks, as the Klingons can no longer afford to maintain hostilities. The Enterprise takes off with newcomer Lieutenant Valeris on board, a young Vulcan woman taking over the helm for Sulu, who is finally commanding his own ship, the Excelsior. Tensions are high during the initial meeting when the Enterprise reaches Gorkon's ship. There are prejudices on both sides. We do get to meet Gorkon as well as his Chief of Staff, General Chang. But the shit really hits the fan when the Enterprise seemingly fires on the Klingon ship. Then 2 Starfleet personnel in spacesuits beam over to Gorkon's ship and assassinate him with phasers. Kirk and Dr. McCoy beam over to render aid, but are accused of being a part of the attack. They are put on trial, convicted of their crimes, and sentenced to hard labor on the frozen penal asteroid Rura Pente. But we know they are innocent, and so does the rest of the Enterprise crew. Inspector Spock is on the case. Spock assumes command of the ship and carries out an investigation. He concludes that the torpedoes were fired from a Klingon bird of prey that must have been parked under the Enterprise and somehow has the ability to fire when cloaked, and the actual assassins must still be on board. Spock also manages to retrieve Kirk and Bones from Rura Pente, and Scotty discovers the identity of the real assassins. But it's too late. Someone has now killed them to cover their tracks. A trap is set to catch their killer, and it turns out it is Lieutenant Valeris. From Valeris, we learn there is a larger conspiracy to sabotage diplomatic relations between the Klingons and the Federation. A conspiracy which includes both Starfleet Admiral Cartwright as well as the Klingon General Chang. Kirk wasn't the only one who mistrusted the Klingons. Enemies on both sides formed an alliance to ensure that they can remain enemies, and Kirk really comes to understand how wrong he was to maintain such resentment. A new peace conference is being held at the neutral planet Khitomer, but Kirk knows there will be another assassination attempt as long as there is still a chance for peace. The Enterprise races to Khitomer and gets in a spectacular space battle with Chang, who is in command of the one-of-a-kind and extra dangerous bird of prey. With the help of Sulu and the Excelsior, the Enterprise defeats Chang and destroys his ship. Our heroes beam down to Khitomer just in time to stop the Federation president from being shot by a sniping assassin, and they arrest the conspirators. Now that the galacto-political clusterfuck has been straightened out, the Enterprise is recalled to space dock to be decommissioned, it is time to retire the ship and her crew. Kirk gives one last log entry, confirming that this is his final cruise on the Starship Enterprise. But the Enterprise legacy will be passed on to a new captain and a new crew, who will boldly go where no man, where no one, has gone before. And with that, it is an end of an era.
They should have Picard at the very end saying, like catching a thrown football from Kirk.
I think that's what the one-man thing was. That was the verbal football.
Yes.
So.
Well, we will get a passing of the baton, or football, in the next movie. We'll talk about next week. But in the meantime, we're just going to go over Star Trek 6, kind of like break it down scene by scene in more detail, and share our thoughts on it. The movie opens with that pretty cool special effect of the actual explosion of Praxis. And we get to see Sulu on the Excelsior.
Yep.
And he seems like such a cool captain. I really wanted that Excelsior show starring George Takei that never came to be. I would have preferred that to Enterprise, I think.
I think I like that Enterprise got to mine a different era, but missing out on Takei in command is a really big missed opportunity. It is a shame because he's super fun as a captain. He's got that commanding quality to him, but with some wit to it. He's just fun to watch, and it's cool to see the original crew growing into, kind of like advancing, leveling up their characters. So in such a cool way.
Yeah, and we see Rand on the Excelsior. So
Yes.
it does kind of remind me of the scene in Charlie X, I believe, when she's when Sulu is like playing with the plants in the little garden room they have.
Yeah.
And,
Mechanical area.
Yeah, and she brings him like a tray with his lunch on it, I guess. Because I guess that's what yeomans did on the Enterprise. But you could tell that they were kind of like friends at work. Like they're kind of like chit-chatting to one another. That was Charlie X, wasn't it?
I think so.
So I like the idea, like, oh yeah, like they were buddies, and like when he had like a opening on his ship, he like offered the job to her or something like that.
And Brian, you were the one who pointed out the other day that, of course, you can see a little bit more of Sulu in command in that Voyager episode. What was the
Flashback?
Yeah.
Flashback.
But I actually,
season 3.
I don't like Captain Sulu as much in that episode as I do in this movie.
Well,
How far apart were those filmed, that Voyager episode and this movie?
Oh, the Voyager episode
5?
came out in the fall of '96, and this would have been released 5 years after this.
Well, because one was the 25th anniversary special, the other was the 30th anniversary special.
There we go.
So,
but it did have both Takei and the actress playing Rand.
Shit, one of us has to. Grace Lee Whitney.
Grace Lee Whitney.
We could not say that.
Yeah,
who sadly is no longer with us.
Yeah.
But Sulu telling the helmsman to like turn the ship into the wave is so cool because he is the helmsman, so he knew the best way to pilot the ship through something like that.
Yeah.
It's cool to see his specialty still coming through, even though he's the guy giving the orders.
And he also has like a really cool like commanding moment later in the movie. But George Takei was so happy to have command of a ship. And Shatner actually tells the story.
To be doing most of his filming on a day where Shatner wouldn't be there.
But this is Shatner's version of the story, so keep that in mind. But he tells the story to where he said to George, maybe at like the table reading or at some point before they started shooting, he said, oh, well, you're going to be on another ship. You're going to be captain of your own ship, and you're going to miss out on all the action. And George Takei was like, responded like real snippily, like, yes, I'm going to be captain of my own ship, and there's nothing you can do about it. But,
that's the Shatner version.
That might relate back to the fact that Takei blames Shatner for messing up the scene in Star Trek 2 where they were talking about him becoming a captain.
And Takei has accused Shatner of like getting in the way of letting other characters shine and keeping Sulu from being a captain of his own ship. Yeah. So, and I don't know, there might be some truth to that, but lots of drama with that group of actors.
In the he said she said of Star Trek drama, I think there's a lot more voices against Shatner than for him, so
Yeah.
I tend to kind of err on the other side. But there's a part of me that always wants reality to be like Galaxy Quest, where Shatner is a better person than maybe he was. Like, I want to believe, but yeah, I don't know. I don't follow it too closely.
I mean, Shatner's been an asshole to me in person, but
You probably brought it on yourself. Come on.
I'll save that story for another time. But yeah, we all get shat on. But when we have
It is an honor to get shat on by the Shat.
if you say so. They get that scene in San Francisco at Starfleet HQ, and that's where they establish that Spock is kind of heading up this diplomatic mission
With the help of Daddy.
Yes, on behalf of his father, and so again, it kind of plays into Star Trek 4 of how like they patched up their relationship, and this is also the beginning of where we see Spock transition from Starfleet officer to ambassador. And
It's also where we learned that all of Starfleet Command is apparently human. So,
yeah, the CNC, Cartwright,
and everybody else I saw at that table except for Spock.
Yeah. How much do you think is that the sort of like humanocentrism of like the writers, and how much do you think that is budgetary because it would just mean more costumes?
I think it's a Nicolas Meyer's thing because there were aliens all over the place in Star Trek 1, and there are... I don't know if there were any aliens on the crew in Star Trek 3, but there were certainly aliens on Earth in Star Trek 3. And there were certainly aliens all over the place in Star Trek 4. And then when we get to 6, suddenly there's no aliens in Starfleet.
Right,
except for Dax.
I think you do see aliens in Starfleet in Star Trek 3 in that scene where Maru is in the torpedo room.
Oh, okay. All right.
Morrow, or whatever his name is.
Yeah,
but,
all right.
But we also get... The line from Spock that there's been almost 70 years of hostilities with the Klingons.
Mm-hmm.
So now that we have like Star Trek Discovery out there, we can kind of like talk about how like that fits into canon with this, and the way I interpret it is like when he's talking about like 70 years of hostility, I think that's talking about how maybe in Discovery they mentioned that there's been like these terror raids from the Klingons that Michael Burnham blames them for killing her parents at the Doctori Alpha colony. We do learn eventually that there's more to that story, but I'm thinking so 70 years ago that must have been like when these terror raids started.
Yeah,
makes sense. Not 70 years of sustained war, but 70 years of high tension and lots of altercations.
Yeah, I think the exact words verbatim are almost 70 years of hostilities.
Yeah.
And there was a war in there.
Yeah, the events of this movie make a bit more sense and are a little easier to sympathize with some of the Section 31 antics after you've seen Season 1 of Discovery and realized how close the Klingons came to, wiping out the Federation.
Yeah, and you also kind of get more sympathy for some of the prejudices that these characters are harboring if you're thinking about like, oh yeah, like,
Scotty probably fought in that war,
like Kirk would have been a cadet during the war, but Scotty, McCoy were probably both in Starfleet.
Yeah.
Spock, we saw that he was on the Enterprise, although he sat out the war, but he's still affected by it
very strongly with his sister.
And we also know Sarek's involvement in that war and how he was willing to like genocide the Klingon planet.
For him, this movie was old hat. He'd be like, "Oh, I decided on that decades ago."
Well, no, I think he's trying to make up for it now in Star Trek 6.
Yeah. Right. That's why certainly not intended in the script from Nicolas Meyer, but it works.
Yes. So I love
retroactively.
I love when we can connect the dots like that and everything works out.
It's pretty cool.
But this also has the moment that does bother me when, and it bothered Shatner. He didn't want to do it when Kirk says to Spock, "Let them die." And the way that Shatner wanted to shoot it was he wanted to say, "Let me die," and then gesture like with his hands, like kind of being shocked of, oh my god, what did I just say? Like I don't mean it.
Did you say "let me die"
or "let them die"?
Oh, yeah, okay.
Sorry, but
he would be aghast that he had just said those words. A little bit like in Last Jedi when Luke almost kills Kylo Ren and is like, "Oh shit."
Yeah, which I actually think that works. I think that's fine.
Yeah.
But anyways, like I think that works better than this. This kind of bothers me that our hero Kirk would say "let them die." but I can kind of justify it in that I think Kirk probably did have a reaction like that. The camera cuts away from him very quickly, and then when it cuts back to him, he does look like a little unnerved about. Maybe he regrets what he just
imagining
said.
in your head,
Spock gave him the glare.
Yeah.
He says it, and then Spock's like, "You have disappointed me," and that hurts Kirk, and Kirk has to reevaluate.
Well, you could argue that he was acting on pure rawest emotion at that moment when he said it. But Father, I'm imagining in your head canon that right after Kirk says it, he does the Home Alone face, and he's like.
Well, not quite, but they did.
I had no trouble with Kirk saying it, by the way, given the events of Star Trek 3. I was like, that felt natural to me.
They did shoot it the way that Shatner wanted, but then they didn't use all of that shot. So Nicolas Meyer kind of tricked him on that one.
Well, it's the kind of thing. The funny thing is, I think a lot of people who had like generals and who had lived through the Cold War, if the same thing were occurring with Russia, might have expressed that sentiment. Like, it feels larger than life, but like the kind of thing I could imagine somebody saying. It does hurt a little bit because Kirk has always been compassionate too. He was never like a brutal Cold Warrior.
Well,
he just lived through difficult times.
He was also the guy who, in Balance of Terror, jumps on a crew member's ass for being so ready to go murder some Romulans.
Yep. But he hadn't had personal problems with the Romulans. The Romulans had been a big wall of nothing for his whole life.
So that brings up another point in this movie, is that our heroes are flawed in this movie.
Yep.
And more to the point, the ugliness that is sometimes present here, for me, is forgivable because at the end of the movie they acknowledge how wrong they were. And Kirk actually brings it up multiple times, how wrong he was.
Here's a quick question. Is there any Trek movie prior to this where there wasn't some element of something wrong with the crew member, an arc that they had to travel, Kirk kind of descending into depression because he'd let himself lose command, because he was feeling age and didn't know how to deal with it? Like, they do have some issues in all of them. This is maybe the biggest, what you would think of as character flaw, because it feels like it's rooted in racism. And that's pretty bad.
Yeah. I don't know if Kirk had much of an arc in Star Trek 4. I mean, is the Kirk at the end of 4 really different than the Kirk
That's
at the
true.
beginning
That's really,
of 4?
I guess, more the arc of, Spock than anything else.
But Kirk has an arc in Star Trek 2 where, Khan gets the jump on him in that first battle.
Yeah.
But then after Kirk kind of gets his confidence back and gets his head in the game, and
arguably that also occurred in Star Trek: The Motion Picture too, where he was making some overtly bad decisions and kind of bullying a china shop to assuming command. But this one feels more personal. Nobody those, you can kind of forgive those as personal foibles or depressions and things like that. Just dealing with a situation you don't know how to deal with for Spock or Kirk. Finding out you're racist, that sucks.
Yeah. The or speciesist. I guess racist still
xenophobic.
Works. Well, racism,
it's a stand-in for that.
Yeah. Races are supposed to be able to interbreed, and humans and Klingons can interbreed. So technically, they are the same species by the most rigorous description of that term. But if they can interbreed and produce fertile offspring,
there is some. This is where some of the heavy-handed dialogue comes about, from other crewmen who are talking about how Klingons all look alike to them or smell weird to them. Really just straight up lifted from the pop culture of how white Americans, and not just white Americans, but how people throughout the world react to people of other races.
I did find it, in hindsight, a little disheartening that it's these young people who are young Starfleet who are racist. The old Starfleet who fought in the war in Discovery makes a lot more sense to me, but the young people doing it was a little that's a little harder to rationalize. Even
they got pulled in by alt-right memes on Reddit.
I'd like to think that that's not a problem in the 23rd century.
Hope so.
Well, Star Trek has always had a few bad apples in Starfleet.
Yeah.
So it's
this was that was probably like Mr. Adventure from Trek 3.
Yeah.
That guy's probably racist.
I think that guy's fine. He's just he just has
Actually,
a
I do
very
kind of
hateable
want
face that
it would have been easy.
I kind of want to know what happened to him.
He's still in that fucking closet.
He's dead. There's just a skeleton in there. They never thought to check.
Every now and then Uhura goes and walks up to there. How we doing, Mr. Adventures?
Oh, you're so young.
She has him like tied up in there, and like she'll go in there and like make him watch her do her Star Trek V fan dance. Because she's always wanted to play to a captive audience.
Did you ever see 9 to 5? You know, they rigged Dabney Coleman up to this S&M harness thing and that pulls him up to the ceiling. I assume he's in that.
I heard they're talking about making a sequel to that, but
yeah,
just
true.
the other day. But
that was a weird little tangent, but I enjoyed it.
Let's get back to Star Trek 6.
Let's do it.
They board the Enterprise. We get that cool shuttle approach to space dock, and we get to see this really gorgeous set of the Enterprise A bridge, which I think it looks great.
Yes.
Much better than it looked in Star Trek V.
It's probably the best bridge in all of Star Trek, potentially, at least in the running, I would say.
And we're also introduced to Lieutenant Valeris, played by Kim Cattrall. And
probably best known for Sex and the City and Mannequin.
And shot her in Mannequin? I haven't seen Mannequin in ages.
She was the Mannequin in Mannequin.
Okay, that was so long ago.
Word. But Nicolas Meyer wanted to have the character Saavik return. He wanted to do like an end to her story. And he really wanted to bring back Kirstie Alley. But at this point...
After the Robin Curtis debacle.
Yes, but I don't know if I call it debacle. I think Robin Curtis was
That's
fine.
kind of how it came to be known in fandom, I think, though.
Well...
But somewhat unfairly, I think. Yeah,
again,
I agree.
Budgetary issues. Paramount said, we're not even going to offer this to Kirstie Alley's agent because there's no way we can afford her, so we're not even going to try.
That's a funny thought nowadays.
She had become like a big hit from her television work.
Yeah.
And so, since he couldn't get Kirstie Alley, he created a new character.
Which I did not approve of. I think it should have been Saavik. But
I think... given her kind of traitorous actions and the fact that I mostly found almost all good things in the character of Saavik, I am glad that she didn't get put through the events of this personally. It does seem... It's weird because there's a character very like Saavik in the role that's not Saavik. But I also don't particularly like Kim Cattrall's portrayal of Valeris. There's something that bothers me in almost... Like, just about her portrayal of it in almost every scene.
As in... Like it's good acting or bad acting.
It feels more like there's a certain height. Her version of being a Vulcan is kind of a little more heightened. I think it's part of it is just the script stuff for me. Like I feel like Saavik was not a standard Vulcan in a lot of ways, but her script was all well written, and there was maybe it's whatever Kirstie Alley brought to the role. Valeris. Just that she feels like a little more cartoonish to me, and that's how I feel. That's it goes to my sort of broader complaints about the movie's dialogue at times. But yeah, she feels a little cartoonish, and so I just never... I didn't like her character the way I kind of instantly liked Saavik.
I thought she was more three-dimensional than Robin Curtis Saavik. But that was because she was given more to work with.
That's also... Nicolas Meyer directed her very differently from how Robin Curtis was directed by Nimoy.
Yeah.
Where Nimoy wanted her to be like a cold, stoic Vulcan, pure logic. Whereas Nicolas Meyer always wanted Saavik to have a little bit more humanity in her performance.
Yeah.
But I would prefer if they had Kirstie Alley back as Saavik. I would have liked to have seen her again. And I think it would have made the betrayal hit a lot harder. It would have hurt more.
Did y'all, when y'all were watching this, were you like, gee, I wonder who the traitor is?
I actually wasn't thinking about it that much.
I don't think I was either.
And I remember kind of piecing it together right as it was revealed. So
I think that's actually about ideal for for a screenwriter to see, is that the moment before the big reveal happens, there's that moment of anticipation as you get it just before it's revealed.
And we'll get into that momentarily, but I think with the big clue to indicate that it's her, I think is the log entry. We'll talk about that when we get there. But I actually, I hadn't questioned where did that come from, how did the Klingons get that. If the movie had been a little bit longer, maybe if someone had mentioned that again somewhere, I probably would have connected it then. mean, I don't know. I was also like a lot younger when I watched this the first time, so
certainly the first time I saw it, I was completely so busy trying to keep track of all the stuff going on and all the special effects and stuff. I didn't even think about try to figure out who was the murderer.
I think I just assumed she was going to be kind of a new character, and I didn't know quite what they would do with her. I think I probably guessed that there might be some twists and turns, but because she is actively involved in the case, being, in a very classical red herring way, I kind of took it on face value that she wasn't going to be implicated.
And I just thought, like, oh yeah, she's kind of like Saavik, especially when she has like a very similar exchange with Captain Kirk about using thrusters only while on space dock.
Right, she's kind of like trying to quote some rules at him and has to get shut down by the old pro.
And I love like that big smile that Scotty gives the warp core as they're like leaving space dock, just because it's like Scotty really loves his engines, but
like, now I've got a Galaxy class warp car.
like now I'm on the set of the Next Generation. This movie, like Star Trek V, does reuse a lot of Next Generation sets. I think they get away with it a little bit better in this movie.
It's set for engineering,
and I do kind of like the Enterprise A having some like new Galaxy class looking type sets. It reminds you that the Enterprise A is a different ship than the one who blew up in Star Trek 3.
Yeah.
But we get the diplomatic mission. The Enterprise is en route to meet Gorkon and his ship, and Kirk gives the log entry that will later come back to bite him in the ass, where he says, I don't trust Klingons. I'll never trust Klingons. I'll never forgive them for what they did to my boy. And but is this I guess the first time they acknowledged David since the Star Trek 3, except for that one line in Star Trek 4. Doesn't Robin Curtis tell Kirk that he died like saving them?
Right.
But other than that, they haven't talked about David. Probably because like they didn't want to be like a Debbie Downer, bringing up like the dead son and the last two movies that were going for like a more like fun tone.
Yeah.
Right. But here you actually see his that he has a framed picture of him that he's looking at with sadness.
Yeah. And I've said on here before that in my opinion, I think like the most. The worst thing that happens in the human experience is the death of a loved one, and I think like psychiatrists like actually classify like someone experiencing like the death of a child as like the most stressful thing that people go through.
That fits.
So that should have like weight to it, and it should be something that like years later Kirk still. He still deals with that baggage.
The interesting thing is, of course, it has to be like come with its own brand of guilt for having been separated from David during all of that time and not having been able to even like. It's like he didn't forge a bond until the like he was an adult, and when he did, he was taken from him. Within
immediately.
Months. Yeah. So it's a particularly terrible situation, or a particular stripe of terrible.
You can also sit there and wonder, if I had stolen the Enterprise a little bit faster, would I have saved David?
Oh, I'd never thought of that. But yeah,
I'm sure Kirk would have thought of it.
Yeah, without a doubt.
Yeah.
And we also get that scene with Spock and Valeris in Spock's quarters, where he's telling her that he's leaving the Enterprise and he wants her to like take his place. And
which is an excellent scene.
It is like the music works really well in there. They're drinking out of like this weird Vulcan glass, doing kind of like a weird alien passing of the torch ceremony.
Yeah.
We have that cool piece of artwork on the wall that was a depiction of Eden and being cast from paradise, which is kind of a reference to Star Trek V, maybe.
Yeah, it's certainly a much better use of religious imagery.
But yeah, with Spock saying that it's a reminder that not everything lasts, everything must come to an end. And he gives the line, logic is often the beginning of things, but not the end, which they would reuse in Star Trek Discovery. And I dislike that was something that Spock knew when he was young. I kind of like that being something that like he figured out now as an older character in Star Trek.
Well, there's
6.
also a question of being told it and understanding it. For a statement like that, are two very different things.
I think Star Trek Discovery was just trying to like use some good memorable dialogue and didn't put that much thought into it, but.
Yeah, they kind of suggested it was like sort of like a Vulcan axiom and not a not something that he thought of in the moment, or that a bit of wisdom he arrived at.
But anyways, the scene is pretty memorable, and they do have a big callback to it later in the movie.
Yeah.
We do get to see the beautiful Katinga model, that gorgeous starship design. That was, the model was first used for the motion picture, very faithfully resembling Matt Jeffrey's D7 from the 60s.
Yeah.
And
they repainted it and stuck little gold fiddly bits all over it. But
because it's Kronos 1. It is the Air Force One of the Klingon Empire.
Yes.
It's super cool looking, and you get to see it kind of cruise smoothly past their view screen and come to a parked spot shortly before it's going to get photon torpedoed. Yeah. But it looks great,
and it looks dangerous. Like, I remember watching this for the first time and being kind of on the edge of my seat because I was ready for like this Gorkon guy, like they're going to come to blows. He's going to try to take advantage of Starfleet or something. Like Kirk didn't trust him, and I didn't trust him either. And he's kind of like a scary looking guy. When he beams over, he's got like that cool wardrobe, and he's got like an elephant tusk for a cane.
And he's got a giant ass. Yeah, it's like he's got kind of a cloak with giant shoulder pads and stuff like that. And he's played by the inestimable David Warner, getting to do much more than he did in Trek 5 as a cigarette smoking, down on his luck ambassador.
Yes, I love me some David Warner. So he was amazing, even in doing his Abraham Lincoln impression.
Yeah, and we also meet the Chancellor's daughter, and I always have a hard time remembering her name. As it Burr?
Boar is how you pronounce it.
Is it Boar?
Boar.
Boar?
Yeah, there's much more ore in it.
I'm just going to call her Zeddy. And the Chancellor's Chief of Staff, General Chang, played by the great Christopher Plummer.
Yes.
Yeah, a character with an actor with Shakespearean training who brings all that to bear in a very literal way, speaking many a memorable line from Shakespeare in the original Klingon. Or, well, he's not speaking it in, but he alludes to that.
Yeah, and Myers wrote the part for him without even checking to see if they could get him, and he was like, oh, I hope... And that's why there was all the Shakespeare stuff in there, and he's like, go get Plummer. I don't care how you do it, just don't come back until you've got him to say yes.
And he didn't want to play a Klingon because he didn't want to deal with all the makeup, so they gave him very minimal makeup to get him to do it.
I kind of like how that ends up showing sort of variety among them.
Me too.
Even if it's just inadvertent because of his weird demand. Well, understandable demand, I guess. But what I like about Chang is he has a sort of infectious, slightly malicious exuberance. He's really fun to watch.
And he has cool chemistry. He has cool chemistry with Shatner.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you can tell this guy he's wanted to meet Kirk. He actually says I've always wanted to meet you, warrior to warrior.
Yeah.
And the way he says it, you're like, that guy wanted to fight Kirk.
Yeah.
And he's got that eye patch, so this guy is scrapped before.
Been through some stuff.
Yeah, and part of the reason why they might have good chemistry is because Plummer and Shatner knew each other when they were both actors in Canada on the stage. Decades before this, Shatner was Christopher Plummer's understudy.
That's crazy.
And Plummer said that
arguably Plummer is such a better overall actor than him. I always thought Shatner is actually a better actor than people give him credit for, but Plummer is a particular level of skill.
He is, but Plummer said he did get jealous sometimes when Shatner went on stage for him, and he felt like he kind of just really stole the show and really grabbed a hold of the audiences in ways that he felt might be outstaging him. And I can see Shatner as being the guy who can go, really dial it up to 11.
Well, Shatner's acting is probably a little more suited for stage work anyway.
Yes,
yeah.
So,
I agree. And yet, I think it's also it's part of what made him perfect for Kirk, because Kirk is somewhere between, he was a modern hero in a bit of the NASA mold, but there's no doubt that he had at least a foot in a little Buck Rogers, Flash Gordon kind of larger than life pulp quality, so that a larger than life quality suited him.
Yeah.
And we also have Valeris, I almost called her Savick. We have Valeris suggest maybe we should open a case of Romulan Ale. She's obviously trying to get them drunk so that they will fall into the plan they have for them
Right, you say obviously, but the first time you're watching this, you're probably just thinking, "Oh, here's a Vulcan who knows how to party."
Yes.
Or she's just trying to.
She recognized that you need
helpful.
to lighten up the mood. Yeah.
Well, you have like that.
Spock does they after the thing is over, the whole meeting is a chore for everybody. Everybody's walking on eggshells, and they have to move topics around a few times.
They're eating blue squid.
They're eating weird blue squid
And blue whales. There are actual little rubber whale-shaped blue whale things on their plates.
Nicolas Meyer, supposedly, I don't know if the story is true, but he supposedly offered to pay any actor who would actually eat some of the blue squid. Because I will pay you cash right now. And the only one who would do it was Shatner.
That kind of fits. He's a big man. No, I'm just kidding. It's there. Is it Chancellor Gurkhan who says that the Federation is little more than a humans only club?
No, that's his daughter.
It's his daughter who says that. That's right. It's here's a reflection of 1980s kind of racial debate in America, but it's an effective line, I think.
And the acknowledgement of inalienable human rights would sound really weird to a non-human alien.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, they're parsing the language for, to pick at it and everything. And
I would hope the translator would have fixed that.
You would hope.
But we do get that squared at the end where we learn that everybody's human.
Yes.
So they do revisit that and say, no,
it's a very liberal use of the word human. It has a quite broad definition.
Yeah, well, but given that they can interbreed, arguably perhaps correct.
We're getting into trivial semantics at that point.
It also, but it does kind of fit in nicely with them acknowledging it's not just a handoff to next generation, but it's a thoughtfulness about language when they say where no one has gone before in the end.
Yeah,
that kind of reflects maybe inadvertently, but reflects the criticism from her.
And Gurkhan also has the toast to the undiscovered country, or to the future.
Mm-hmm.
Right. That was always a little bit weird because he was certainly using it to mean the future, but the undiscovered country in Hamlet's speech is death.
Hamlet, Act 3, Scene 1.
Yeah, you remember it more from remembering this than I do from reading Shakespeare.
But isn't it... Is it really death, or is it just the unknown that comes with death?
I think it is the unknown. Yeah,
is there an afterlife?
That's why he's That's why he's afraid, Hamlet, of what might happen after he dies.
Because that's really how they talk about the undiscovered country in this movie, and like the fear that Kirk has. It is a fear of the unknown that is the future.
Right, and I do think there's no doubt in my mind that Nicolas Meyer knew his Shakespeare.
Yeah, and I think the framing for the Star Trek story was that the future can be scary, but it can also be good and promising, and so it's kind of like a balancing of your optimism with your fears of when you're dealing with change.
Right.
Interestingly, I just finished. I'm almost done reading Nicolas Meyer's little autobiography or memoirs, and he says that now in a post 9/11 world, he perhaps would have portrayed these the conspirators in Star Trek VI, slightly more positively than he had at the time. He perhaps thought that he seemed to think that the disaster of 9/11 and the growth of terrorism might have been in part due to the falling of the end of the Cold War, and he felt that perhaps that should have been reflected in his movie. And I was like, I don't know if I agree with that, Mr. Myers.
I don't understand that.
I don't quite understand it either, but that was what he said. Is he kind of regretted?
That's interesting. So his biography was, I guess, obviously written post 9/11.
Yes,
it's interesting.
Okay, yeah, that's weird.
That was weird. That's
But we should talk about the actual
the assault.
Yeah, when the torpedoes hit that ship, and we're just like, oh no, what the hell's going on? And then you have the zero gravity assassination.
Right, a pretty bloody, gory sequence for Star Trek, maybe slightly reined in by the fact that it's filled with purple CG Klingon blood, which I never quite liked. But it's a really well done scene, though.
It is, and I love the music in it. I love that the two guys are so deadly. How they're just marching through the ship,
right?
And the cool.
They're almost assassinating people the way the Terminator went through killing cops
police station
in the first Terminator. Yeah,
and the cool black assault phasers from Star Trek V with the blue beams that I love.
Mm-hmm.
I like everything about that sequence, and it was shocking to I remember my first experience with this movie very well. I remember being nervous about Gorkon when the Klingons beam over. I remember thinking no, I think Chang is the one who's the most antagonistic towards Kirk. I think he's up to something. And then we see these two Starfleet personnel massacre these Klingons, and I'm like, oh my god, what is going on? and
the fact that one of the Klingons gets their arms sheared off is particularly kind of disturbing.
Yeah, that was shocking.
He survives though, right?
Yes,
because you see him at the end.
Yeah, you see him testify.
Yeah.
But then when Chang gets control of the ship again, and he calls the Enterprise and threatens to blow them out of the sky. Mm-hmm. I was expecting a big battle, and then when Kirk says, "No, tell them we surrender."
Yeah,
I just remember my jaw being on the floor.
Did they show that in the trailer? Do you remember?
I didn't.
I wonder if that was shown because it would be one of the big dramatic moments. It's actually one of my favorite moments in the whole movie. The kind of the sharpness when is it Uhura who doesn't is looking at him do you really want to say that? And he's like, we surrender! And he's very intense about it.
And then her repeating it where, her performance where she is, both very, dutiful and both very, scared of what's going on.
Right.
When she's just telling them, this is Enterprise, we surrender. The way that she played that was great.
It's interesting because in the context of this movie, in a way, that's kind of the most heroic thing Kirk does.
Yes.
Is to sacrifice his pride and potentially safety for the sake of Galactus.
And perhaps his whole crew if they decide to fire even after he surrendered.
Kirk's a good soldier. He does disobey orders sometimes, but he normally has a good reason when he does it. For the most part, he's gonna do the mission.
He generally does not disobey orders for selfish reasons. He disobeys orders because he feels he can save more people,
for the greater good.
For the greater good. And in this case, the greater good means surrendering. So
you might be thinking about the needs of the many.
Yes.
And then when they go over to Gorkon's ship, you actually do see Spock slap the Viridium patch onto Kirk's back.
A giant Velcro tracker looking thing.
Yes.
That was Nicolas Meyer putting his Sherlock Holmes clues in the story or on the screen, I should say.
Yeah.
Right, and Father, I think I thought nothing of it at the time, or I wouldn't. I don't generally look for much for clues in the movies, but
I didn't notice it.
Did you?
I thought Brian said he caught it the first time.
The first time I saw it, he just stuck something on back of Kirk. What the heck is that? And then I was watching it later on. What is that thing on the back of his uniform?
Yeah.
When I watched it the second time, though, I did look to see if you could see that, and I was so pleased that they actually do plant that in there.
Yeah.
And that they always show that patch on his back after that. Mm-hmm. And it is weird that, nowhere did, Klingon guards think, what's this thing? And, take it off of them. But I can look past that. I thought that was pretty cool.
What happens when you scan it? It is giving off a signal that can be seen for 40 light years. Let him have it.
And then we have Dr. McCoy trying to save Gorkon, which again, that surprised me because I was thinking, well, that guy I thought was going to be the bad guy, but I guess he was sincere. When he tells Kirk, "Don't let it end this way," I was like, "Oh no, that guy was actually a good guy."
Yep.
So you were never thought to get, you never, just like Kirk, you never thought to take Gorkon at his word.
Yes.
Nice. So.
Arguably, we only had the show to go on, the show and the movies, and the Klingons had nearly always been shown to be duplicitous. So,
I have to admit, I think I'd had some of those beats spoiled for me when I saw the movie the first time, so I can't tell you what my original reaction was. Largely, this is when they assassinate the Klingon. So okay,
I'm trying to think the most genial interactions with Klingons. Otherwise, the barroom fight in Trouble with Tribbles, which is at least kind of just a dust-up. But I'm thinking, of course, of...
Day of the Dove, they kind of in on good terms.
I need no help
when
to hate
Earth. Smacks the shit out of Kirk's back. Which,
in a way, Kirk does with Spock in Trek 09. I mean, he actually does the exact back pat too hard.
Yeah.
And then in Star Trek V, they actually end on pretty good terms with the Klingons then. So
that's true.
They also...
who was the terrible Klingon? Claw?
Yeah.
Is that it? You got to figure after he was forced to apologize like that, he probably went on some sort of rampage or something. He was like, I'm going to go kill like 20 Federation people now.
Mind you, we had the Next Generation showing us Worf was not all bad by this point.
Yeah, when this movie came out, season 5 of TNG was on the air.
But they just, TNG just began with the relations having cooled between them. So it was obviously important to tell the story of how it happened.
Yes. Which I also really enjoy in this movie because I like them doing something that ties into continuity and ties into the Next Generation, and
has Worf in it.
And yeah, they have Colonel Worf, who we've fandom or someone eventually determined is the grandfather of Worf.
I think it was planned from while they were writing the script and stuff that's who he was.
And they also have the final peace talks take place at Camp Kittimer. Because they had mentioned Kittimer Accords in the Next Generation, even though that original meaning I think had to do more with yesterday's Enterprise and a battle with the Romulans that took place at Kittimer.
No, that took place at Naranda 3.
Oh, that was Naranda 3.
Worf came from Kittimer.
Where Romulans killed Worf's parents at Kittimer.
Yes.
But yeah, this was a good repurpose and reuse of that. So yeah, that Camp Kittimer, that's where Worf lived when he was a very little baby. And then Romulans came and blew it up and killed his parents. But the way that after Gorkon dies, when Chang places Kirk and McCoy under arrest, I love the little thing he does where he says under Article 17 of your interstellar law, he really stresses your. I calling them hypocrites and you're in violation of
he gets to chew up some courtroom scenery there.
Yeah, and then this is before that.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
But then when we actually do get into the trial, that's when Christopher Plummer can just be unleashed and go crazy, and it works because Chang is trying to put on a show also.
Yeah.
It makes sense.
Chang himself, the character, is a scene chewer. But yeah, and the big moment that everyone loves is don't wait for the translation, answer me now, which that actually came from something going on at the UN during the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Okay, yeah. I knew it was a real-life event of some kind.
Yeah, you mentioned that the other day, and I had not known that was drawn from real life, because otherwise it almost sounds a little outrageous, but that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And I love when Spock has that line that says, it'll be in the hands of the diplomats. And then we cut to the Klingon ambassador from Star Trek 4. Yeah. This is another thing I remember watching this the first time. I was like, oh, not this guy again. I was like, Kirk will never get a fair trial now with this guy. But we get to see Sarek and the president of the Federation. And they're, again, keeping up with the canon in the continuity. They're in Paris, which is where I think the Next Generation established the president of the Federation's office is in Paris on Earth.
Yeah, well, I'm not sure if they established that or not. I know they kept with it after that point, but yeah, and his office looks suspiciously like 10 Forward. But
is this the guy that's the president played by Kurtwood Smith?
Yes, who would go on to be on DS9 and Voyager, and most famously known from RoboCop and that 70s show.
Clarence Boddicker and Red Foreman?
Yeah,
Foreman.
But I had forgotten he was in this. It's been a little while since I've seen it.
And he's playing the species of a character we saw on the Saratoga in Star Trek 4. Yeah. I'm not sure what species that is, but it looks...
The novelization claims Delton, but that doesn't make much sense to me.
It looks more like he's a keyboardist in a prog rock band.
Well, with his facial hair, he looks kind of Klingon-ish, and I think that's kind of confusing, so I wish they had done something that was less Klingon.
Yeah.
But
he was supposed to be blind, but... they clearly don't seem to be playing it that way in the office scene where they have him shots of his eyes responding to various things.
Well, they do in the scene that's only available on the DVD and the VHS that was not in the theater and was not on the Blu-ray. When Colonel West comes into the president's office and presents a plan to go and rescue Kirk and McCoy called Operation Retrieve, he puts on his little sunglasses to look at the chart.
Yeah.
So that might have been his version of Geordie's visor or something. I don't know. But
He does kind of act blind at the Kittimer conference, though.
Yeah.
Little staring into space.
I don't think they'd quite figured it like halfway through the production.
It's weird to have a character that may or may not be blind in a movie. Usually that is a thing.
Yes.
It's a binary choice.
Yeah, well, I think they decided halfway through that he wasn't blind, but then they left that old footage there. And
yeah. I don't think it particularly adds much to it to have him blind or not, but
I like it better with him not being blind.
I think
they dropped it.
If they'd stuck with the blind thing, I would have liked it. The half-assing, I prefer to just headcanon that he wasn't blind, and that's probably the way we're supposed to.
How would you sum up his character as a person?
Classically good presidential.
Yeah, do we think that generic movie president?
Do we think the blindness was originally going to be one of those things where like the Justice is blind kind of thing? He's going into it without presuppositions.
I think it was just supposed to be, look, blind people can become president in the future. Isn't
that
awesome?
Well, but Nicolas Meyer is a guy who does also work with symbology and multiple levels of meaning and stuff. So I could see him as potentially having meant it to, like, at one point in the script, maybe it was going to be meaningful, and then they kind of dropped it, and so they dropped it as in the story.
In the cut scene from the theatrical cut and from the Blu-ray with Colonel West, who's played by the Odo actor from DS9, Rene Auberjoise, I can't say his French last name.
I'm so glad I'm not the only person who
can. Anyways, Colonel West comes in as like this very like hawkish Starfleet officer, and the president even asks him, like, well, what will happen if this leads to a war? And he says something like, quite frankly, Mr. President, we would clean their chronometers.
Yeah.
So he's, like, ready to go to war. He's actually part of the conspiracy and would actually be the guy attempting an assassination on that president.
Can we all accept that the conspiracy is a Section 31 thing?
I think that's extremely fitting.
Yeah, that works.
And that's how I viewed it for years.
Yes. Now, next question. Is Valeris a member of Section 31, or was she recruited for this particular situation?
Either, I think, would work.
All right.
There was a small thing that they threw out early on, I think when they're initially sending Kirk off on the mission, which is that there's 50 years left in the lifespan of the Klingon Empire, they think, after this major disaster.
This major ecological crisis.
Right, they could eke out a few more decades. But that somebody also says that they think that like the kind of the hardliner conservative element in the Klingon government, if they don't assist them, could decide to go out in a blaze of glory, right?
Yeah,
yes.
Which that feels like a pretty good analysis of the Klingons.
Yes. Yeah, that's fitting with how we've seen the Klingons depicted in other pieces of Star Trek.
If you back them into a corner, they will choose violent death over any other. So.
Yeah, it's a small thing, but I liked that acknowledgement that there actually is some self-interest in helping them in this. It's not just 100% a mission of mercy. Yeah. You might have a reason to do it.
One has to assume that big shockwave wiped out a large number of their ships, or West wouldn't be so, we can win the war now. We don't have to worry about winning the war.
I like that the president rejected that plan in the scene that's not on the Blu-ray, and then the Starfleet CNC, he actually says to the president, those men have literally saved the planet. And then the president has like this cool presidential line where he says, and now they'll save it again by standing trial.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's how you president.
Yes.
He acknowledges consequences of actions. Yes. People take responsibility. Imagine that.
Yeah, it must be nice.
Yes.
Do y'all want to talk about like the mystery on the Enterprise and Spock as Sherlock Holmes, or possibly a descendant of Sherlock Holmes?
I assume he's just a descendant of Sir Arthur Conan Doyle,
or a descendant of a Vulcan who came up with that piece of Vulcan logic.
I'm fine with him just being a descendant of Doyle.
Just to clarify, we're talking about when you've eliminated the
impossible, whatever remains, no matter how improbable, must be the truth.
Yeah. Right. A quote that Data will later drop.
Nope. Data used it before this movie.
Chronologically for the characters.
But I think people forget that TNG did that first before Nicolas Meyer.
Oh yeah, no,
I doubt Nicolas Myers knew that Data did that.
I agree with you.
Yeah.
I think I always thought it was like a small tip of the hat to Next Generation, just to Worf, the actor, what's his...
Michael Dorn?
Michael Dorn is in there. There's that, and there's the Where No One Has Gone Before, and a few other, what feels like handoffs. I thought that was just, like, a not particularly meaningful one, but I thought it was like a little tip of the hat.
I'm pretty sure it's because Nicolas Myers loves Sherlock Holmes.
Yeah.
It would certainly fit.
That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
But Spock does come to the conclusion rather quickly that it must be a bird of prey that can cloak and
not a Romulan
torpedoes.
bird of prey, which is odd because given the clues he has, the Romulans screwing up the peace treaty sounds perfectly plausible. That would make a hell of a lot of sense.
But it's also at a time where a Romulan ambassador is hanging out on Earth in the president's office. So
I think
there's a Klingon ambassador there too. Does he still says Klingon bird of prey?
I think the practical effect is like Romulans. Do they get any real consideration at all in this movie?
Other than one of them is part of the conspiracy
at the very end, right?
Yeah.
But otherwise, they're not really on screen during any of the movie at all, right?
No, but this is the first time we ever see a Romulan in a Star Trek movie. Now that I think about it,
No, Caitlin Dar, the ambassador in Star Trek V.
Oh yeah. The first one that's not in a shitty movie.
Okay, well, yes.
But another thing in the president's office there is that when the Klingon ambassador is saying how no, these men like must face trial, and the president like looks over at Sarek, and Sarek's like, I'm afraid I have to agree with my esteemed colleague's interpretation of the law, or something along those lines.
Yeah.
But he has to refer to this guy as his esteemed colleague, or he's choosing to do that to be diplomatic.
Yeah.
But I never thought about this before, but when I was watching this recently, I was thinking like, oh, and like in Star Trek 4, these two guys were kind of sparring, and they were having like verbal sparring in front of the Federation Council, talking about Kirk and Genesis and stuff. So Sarek probably really didn't want to like call him like my esteemed colleague, and just like made this stuff like hurt a little bit.
Well,
more.
yeah, I finally got Kirk. I finally got Kirk, is the Klingon, and Sarek's like, yeah, you got Kirk, okay.
Then
so, hang on one second. I just want to quick double back on the mystery thing. So it's
I was trying to get to that.
It's one of the things I'm not really fond of in the movie. I feel it kind of all is a little bit hokey. There's guys with like mine detectors running through the ship.
Why does that bother you?
It just it's so dopey looking.
It's just like a badass tricorder.
I think they just decided to look for blood traces.
They honestly, they the way they filmed it is part of it. Like I feel like they kind of like showed like everybody is looking under books and things like that, and it felt more like I was watching the movie
because they've proven that the computer log has been tampered with, so they have to physically look at stuff.
It felt more like Clue to me.
There was definitely some on the noseness involved in that whole investigation.
They pull out the boots and stick them to the wall.
None of that bothers me. To me, it feels like it works. It reminds me of in Star Trek 2 when people are like running around like loading torpedoes and doing like very hands-on men or service people on a ship.
Yeah.
I think making shit work.
I think that there's a tonal difference and maybe a difference in execution where that looked like almost like it could have been based on real wartime footage of people just running around in like a serious situation. And this felt like a stagey thing to me, I guess.
I don't know.
I mean, I will say this. I know that I'm clearly on the outs on this because I know this is a beloved movie and it doesn't really bother people. But for whatever reason, the combination of kind of the what I think of as kind of hokey dialogue throughout a lot of the mystery stuff, and the way it's that feels to me like I don't get into those scenes. I feel distant from it.
See, what bothered me, where it really started to cross the line, Scotty, it just happens to be Scotty who finds the uniform, not some random crew member who finds it in the ventilation duct. It's Scotty. They hid it in the officer's dining room, which is an odd place to hide something if you're trying to keep people from finding it. And then right after they find the uniforms, they find the bodies. They just open a door and boom, there they are. And it's like, wow, that was all really convenient.
But and even like drawing the conclusion of like the Klingon bird of prey, it felt like we were talking about a second ago. That felt kind of convenient.
Well, arguably the notion that their sensors aren't good enough to have like very quickly just backtracked and seen where the photon torpedo came from would have been like not literally from their ship, but from like
the logs were tampered with
20 feet under it. That's true.
Yeah.
But like I would think that Klingons would also have this kind of information even if their ship got bumped
Well, they
up.
also have one of the conspirators on that ship, so you'd think those logs would also be tampered
Yeah,
with.
and
guess
he's the
so.
guy in charge after
That's a good
Gorkon's
point.
dead. So yeah, it actually that part does actually
It's one
work
of those things where it's almost
surprisingly
like
well.
because they literally see it on the screen, and I'm like, I think you would like after as much as they've seen, they would say like, that didn't look like it came from us.
How do you know? Because they didn't cut to an external shot showing it
That's right.
firing.
That's just how things work.
We got to talk about Rura Pinte.
Yes, Alaska.
Yeah, this was shot at Brian's home world of Alaska.
Yes,
And we also had a Star Trek veteran actor, W. Morgan Shepard, playing the Klingon warden,
yes.
who we should acknowledge him because he recently passed away back a few months ago in January. But he also played Ira Graves in the TNG episode The Schizoid Man.
And one of my favorite characters in Babylon 5, the Soul Hunter.
Yes.
He's just got he's got a great kind of gravelly voice and presence, and he's never failed to bring something cool to his roles.
He played a character in the Voyager episode Bliss, and he is also in Star Trek 09. He was a Vulcan in Star Trek 09.
Yes.
Oh, well. I forgot.
He
I
was
keep forgetting that one.
the one up there was like, so Spock, we were going to let you into the Science
Yeah,
Academy.
right.
He's the science minister, I think is how he was credited. But so on the planet we get to meet the character Mardia, who's there to like help get Kirk and McCoy out of the prison.
Played by the model Iman, known to many as David Bowie's wife.
Yes.
She's
a cameloid.
Yes, a shape-changing computer morphing technology using...
That was the first time they had a morphing effect in Star Trek.
Yeah, I think it had been in like Willow and maybe that Michael Jackson video, black and white. I think.
Oh, maybe.
But yeah, it was just starting to hit as
and T2 was that same year.
T2 is the biggest.
It looked better than the animation they used for morphine in Next Generation Season 2 episode the Dolphin.
Yeah,
where Wesley Crusher's girlfriend turns into like a big monster.
It's a pretty good effect. What do y'all think of her character?
She's fine for what she is. Apparently, she was meant. They really originally wanted Sigourney Weaver, and she was supposed to be much more of a Han Solo type. And instead, we got a much more suave and sophisticated-y kind of.
She seemed like a kind of a confident. I don't know, like she did seem like a smuggler type person. I will say, like, I love the idea of the prison colony, but I feel like that, like, Kirk's acting is kind of too campy in it for me.
I liked his talk with McCoy in the bunk. That is excellent.
I love that conversation.
See, what do they talk about?
Are you afraid of the future? That was the general idea I was trying to get across, or something like that.
Because McCoy says, "Oh yeah, we're Kobayashi Maru."
Yeah.
Which I always say that, like, if it's like if none of your options are good, I always say, like, yeah, the situation is a Kobayashi Maru.
Yeah.
I do think I agree that's some of this maybe the strongest part of the scene, and that's it's the classic actors being put together with minimal interruptions.
But like Kirk talks about how he was terrified of the future. It's that fear of the undiscovered country that I brought up earlier. Yeah. And that
it's really getting to the heart of what the story is about.
Yeah, and that he was used to hating Klingons, and that he says that Spock was right. And I think this is when he says, like, it never occurred to him to trust Gorkon.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. But this is also when he gets, like, really... Kirk, we've said it before, is like, he's a doer. And, like, when he has, like, an objective, he's going to find a way to get it done. And this is where he realizes, there's a lot more at stake than just me and my friend, Dr. McCoy here. There are still peace talks continuing. Because you remember at the trial when the judge said, because of the peace talks, we're not going to do the death penalty.
Right.
So he's like, that means the talks are going to continue. That means that the real assassins are going to try again. So at that point, he has even more motivation to escape so that he can save the day. And I love Kirk being like, oh, like here's a mission. Someone needs to step in and be the hero and make some shit happen here. I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
But they.
Is it during those scenes where he says, "I was used to hating the Klingons"?
Yeah,
yeah. So it's a good line.
This is where I can forgive seeing that ugliness in these characters because they acknowledge it.
Right.
Yeah. Well, when Nimoy and Myers were talking about a huge touchstone was, who am I when I don't have my enemy anymore? was the fear. That is the core of who am I when I don't have my enemy.
And I don't know if that needs to be like too big of a focus, because Kirk did a lot of shit besides like deal with the Klingons.
Well, it wasn't just Kirk. It's everybody's has to answer that question for themselves.
The Klingons are like the primary villain of Star Trek at this point, but they're not the only thing in Star Trek. Like Starfleet does a lot of other stuff.
When the movies came about, things started to become a little bit more... People started to kind of buy into the cliche of Kirk a little bit more. And the movies even played to cliche sometimes more. So I think the notion of him having to do it makes sense, because that's kind of... The legend had kind of come to be believed by the audience. And so he Nixon had to go to China.
Yeah. That is cool that like Starfleet had like, we gotta like send like our top dog that, like the Klingons would think twice before they mess with them.
And that is insightful in that, Klingons are going to respect a warrior who has fought many battles.
Right, and if Kirk can actually like propose peace, then it will be more meaningful than if somebody else did.
Chang respects the hell out of Kirk.
Yeah.
He said like he always wanted to meet him. Of course, he wanted to meet him like in battle, but
he gets his wish.
Though in the end, he's just kind of sucker punching him to death. That's not very terribly honorable. But
let's get to that first. We have like the Enterprise goes past the guard station, I guess.
Yeah,
and their version of Epsilon 9.
Yeah, the Klingon version of Epsilon 9.
You want to talk about on the nose?
I like that scene. I like it.
This is the one where they all have to, where they're diving through books to translate Klingon.
Yeah.
And Uhura is garbling her. Uhura's skill kind of becomes a bit of a joke.
That might be my least favorite part of the movie.
They never said that like Uhura like knew different languages or anything. That's something that was like established in the Kelvin movies.
Yeah, Kelvin Uhura took her Klingon classes.
And I like seeing that version of Uhura too, but I just laugh at this stuff where it's cheap humor, but the where she's saying what is it like? We are condemning foods, supplies, and things. But to me it was kind of...
It doesn't belong in this movie.
That was it reminded me, like that, taken with the Scotty doing the, Spock saying, I'm sure he's well into planning his escape by now, and then cutting to Kirk getting beat up.
I like that too.
I was okay with that.
To me, they're all somewhat of a piece, and like I think I got a little wary of it early on, and then every single one I was like,
See, I was fine with the Spock one, but
did the hands of the diplomats bother you too?
Which one?
When he said it'll be in the hands of the diplomats, and then it cuts to the Klingon ambassador.
Actually, I just didn't like Spock's delivery on that. It sounded too self-aware in a weird way.
I liked it.
But this sort of speaks to if you're generally on board a movie, you're gonna like roll with those things. If you're not, you're gonna nitpick it, and so I nitpick it.
What about when they beam them up right before the warden says, his name is, and then they beam them up?
I like that just because it subverts the usual. We're going full cliche.
Yeah.
Oh, no, we're not pulling the rug out from under you.
And then Kirk's
it's a dramatic contrivance. Weirdly, that stuff doesn't bother me too much.
And McCoy being like, hell no, I don't want to go back.
Yeah. It's like, I'm fine with not knowing who did that. I'm just glad to be safe.
But then the warden calls Kang and tells him, like, oh yeah, like these two escaped. So then we get like our big battle. They learn from Sulu that the peace talks are at Kittimer. And Kirk says, bless you, Sulu. And I don't know, I like that for whatever reason. But they get in it's kind of like a cool submarine battle. Because it's kind of echoes Balance of Terror, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Or Meyer's own...
The cut-down, highly super-edited version of Balance of Terror.
Or his own Mutara Nebula battle in Trek 2.
But we skipped a part where they do the mind meld with Valeris.
Yeah!
A scene that has particularly aged poorly.
It doesn't bother me, but I get the impression that, it comes off as I hate using the term in like this, but rapey.
Yeah.
But I think really and truly, like the way mind melds have frequently been used in Star Trek, where you go into someone's mind to pull out information, that's kind of been done before. I don't think Spock is doing something nearly as bad as what Sybok was doing to people in the previous movie. He's like
Cybok's reasons were worse. He just was doing it to fulfill his own ambitions.
But he's like a serial rapist. He's going in. He's like prying into people's minds, reaching into like their deepest, darkest secrets without their permission. Like and then they become like subservient to him. I think that's way worse than what Spock did to Valeris.
So the way mind melds have often been used for Spock to go to our traditional comic book side reference was how like in the early days of the X-Men, Professor Xavier would often do a little mind nudge to make a villain forget an identity or something like that would help them out. It was just kind of a trope of the time. It was how they get information fast. And sometimes push a plot point forward quickly, or escape a plot point.
That's how they
don't
use
like.
it here,
right? And so, I'm like on that level, I somewhat excuse it because they make such an effort to show her discomfort. Even if you don't
and the crew's discomfort,
right? Even if you don't evoke the word rape, it's as if he's torturing her.
Yeah.
But I think it works because a mind meld actually, like a non-consensual mind meld, actually is disturbing if you think about it. And so I like that they added that realism to it. For me,
here's the thing: if it were the show 24, that's what Jack Bauer does.
Yeah.
On Star Trek, they usually they sometimes like to show them push, but usually they find a better way.
They've had mind melds before. This isn't the first time they
forced
did that.
mind melds.
I don't know if you could say that Van Gilder could
that guy was kind of
consent to a mind meld.
Yeah, but he was just bonkers. So there was trying to help.
And then when is it? Is it it's the one where like the computers are like picking people to die? When Spock like mind melds with someone through a wall,
and gets him to walk into the room.
Yeah. That's
he stuck an idea into his head, not rummaged around in his. And the guy wasn't like,
And basically, when you just had Valeris admit that, like, I know who the conspiracy people are, but I'm not going to tell you.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay,
again, that's the most 24 a show can possibly get.
Yeah. Well, here's what I feel about it.
Jack Bauer tortured people all the time to get the bomb real quick.
But this is why torture is stupid, because it's not effective. Yeah. Because when you're torturing someone, they're not compelled to tell you the truth. They're compelled to tell you whatever will make you stop hurting them. Well, they'll give you the answer that you want to hear or what they think will make you stop. A mind meld is like 100% effective.
Well, in stories where people use torture, like in 24, they usually do make it effective.
I will say, on one hand, Nicolas Meyer in his memoirs actually said, now that we've got all this Homeland Security waterboarding stuff, I kind of feel that torturing Valeris to get the information, he said torture, not rape, in the book, was probably not the best way to go, and I kind of regret that scene. On the other hand, Leonard Nimoy said this is what Spock would do in these circumstances if anyone knows what Spock would do. So I'm kind of like, okay, was it ethically dubious? Yes. Was it what Spock would do? Yes. So this is Spock perhaps crossing the line. It's left up to the audience.
Well, this is my take on it, is that I think it works for the story, and I think that it's effective in the movie because it is disturbing. Yeah. And I think that was the intent behind it. Yeah. However, I can see how if that movie was made today, it would be irresponsible because we do have these issues with torture, and that this does come off as the optics on it are so similar than that. Yeah. But in fake made up Star Trek land, a mind meld is not the same as like torturing someone. Yeah. It's like an effective way to get this information of someone who's essentially just like confessed to knowing it. So
they made it look pretty uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But it was supposed to be uncomfortable.
Yeah. And I don't think it breaks Spock or breaks Star Trek, but I think it's okay to say Spock might have crossed the line in that scene.
And when I was watching it for the first time, I remember it was like at my grandparents' house, and when Valeris started like screaming like that, I had to like get up and like run to the TV and like turn it down because like I didn't want Mimi and
super violent stuff.
I didn't want Mimi and Papa to come in there like, sounds like you're watching someone getting raped. What's going on?
Well, so yes, I think that kind of that's your way of admitting that it might have been crossing some lines.
Does Spock say anything before he does it? Like, I wish I didn't have to do this, but we need to know. I almost feel like
it's
just
apparent that like
I know, but I still kind of
he has regret on his face after.
Yeah.
I wish that there had been something like that.
Since we haven't gone there yet, in the novelization, the writer actually can't handle it and rewrites the context. And so Valeris thinks she's going to get raped. She thinks she's going to get mind raped. Spock puts his hand on her, and then he reaches out, and in his mind he says, "Listen, we have to have this information. Would you just tell it to me?" And she decides, and he explains, and he kind of also projects his vision of the future, and she says, "Oh, all right, I'll just tell you." And there's no, and she...
Does she have legitimate regret, or does she, like, feel like you really should know?
I can't remember the exact details, but the point is, she decides to give the information
That's
up.
interesting.
And the author just flat out refused to go there and rewrote the scene.
That's interesting, and that was at the time.
Yeah, and I was like... I don't actually like that. I kind of feel like, that might be... Most of the time I like the changes they make or the improvements or the fixes, but I actually kind of found that annoying because that's going against what Leonard Nimoy thought Spock would do. And
I think I do sort of like it. I kind of like the notion of like somebody being confronted on a pure mental level with the truth, or like almost having to deal with hope in a way that she hadn't, or a more positive vision. I'd like to read it and see how it plays out.
After that, she does kind of cave, and it's implied that like she's willing to give like a full confession after that, and
there's no screaming or oh face or any of that stuff in the novel. So
but then they're en route to Kittimer, so we get the big battle, which this is where they did choose to spend the money, and it looks so good because of it.
It is gorgeous.
And every shot of the Enterprise, every shot of the Excelsior, of the Bird of Prey, all of it is gorgeous.
A couple of those shots where they actually had gotten special effects to the point where they could do real quick and dirty shots instead of doing storyboards. They just throw up a green screen and move the model across and do some quick shots and then show it to the director. Is that about what you're looking at? And they ended up keeping some of the storyboard shots that they showed Nicolas Meyer because they thought they were good enough.
One of the things I think Myers is really good at is kind of building the dramatic tension of a battle, so that like when Kirk tells Khan, Khan wants the Genesis information, and he's like, "Here it comes," and it's this really underplayed thing when he's right about to bloody his nose hardcore. Yeah. So that when they kind of build to the big finale where Chang's ship is revealed, Sulu gets to say fire, Kirk gets to say fire, and you just get this very satisfying payback.
And it's so well edited, like before that, when you have Sulu like racing to get there, and those helmsman's like she'll fly apart, and he's like, "Fly her apart, then."
Yeah,
and they're like, "Oh yeah, I love Captain Sulu."
He got to say a very kind of classic badass captain.
The way that it cuts back and forth from the battle to the planet to Zeddy's speech. I'm going to call her Zeddy because I can't say her name or remember it.
Gorkin's daughter.
And then when you have like the president's speech, and you're just getting like these little tidbits of it, but you're also seeing the assassin, who may or may not be Colonel West, depending on what version of the movie you're watching. And then it cuts like from that to like the battle to like McCoy and Spock trying to put the torpedo together to Chang being intentionally like annoyed. Like the movie's intending for you to be like annoyed and frustrated with this guy who's just like having the time of his life, quoting Shakespeare, fighting the legendary Captain Kirk.
Yes, he's evil Picard.
Just spinning around his chair, cry havoc and let slip the dogs of war, and just that was like the best day of his life until he sees that torpedo that he's figured out is like tracking him and it's coming towards him, and he's just like, oh shit, to be or not to be.
I think he's still like that. He died like he wanted to live.
That's true. He died on the battlefield.
He wanted there to be a giant war between Starfleet and the Klingon Empire, and that's how he died.
And you get that gorgeous explosion of the Bird of Prey.
That has like 5 internal explosions, and then the head blows up on the ship,
and it looks so good that the big action climax of the next movie. I guess it's not like the action climax because there's still some stuff that happens on the planet, but the next movie reuses that exact same shot.
Yes,
which is always. But I noticed that the first time I saw Star Trek Generations, and it's always bothered me. Yeah, especially if you're watching.
I did not know it until you told me a few weeks ago.
Yeah. Now, in the original script, in it's supposed to be the Excelsior that comes up with the magic torpedo that can track down and hit Chang. Right. And that's why they set up that the Excelsior has all these special tools for hunting gaseous anomalies in the opening scene with Excelsior. And then suddenly that equipment is on board the Enterprise.
Makes more sense.
Apparently, Kirk Shatner said, no, my ship needs to be the big hero.
Supposedly, he didn't want anyone to come to the rescue of Kirk.
So, do you have a preference on which version would have been better if you were in charge and could tell Kirk or Shatner to shove it?
Because Kirk gets so many big moments, I think that I could have allowed for that one to be Excelsior's big moment.
Yeah, Kirk still gets to go down and save the president. I still
think Sulu and the Excelsior get a lot to do. And they beam down there, too. They arrest Admiral Cartwright.
Yeah, well, that might be to make up for the fact that they didn't get the torpedo.
We get, like, that cool... We get that when Shatner makes that incredible long jump to, like, save the president, which felt like... I always call this movie as, like, the political thriller of the Star Trek movies. And when you dive, like, stop an assassination, that's very, like, classic political thriller.
Yeah.
Behold my stunt double!
And then that final log entry where they're ordered to return to space dock, and Spock says, I believe my response would be go to hell if I was human. And I love like Kirk just like gets establishing like, yeah, this is our final mission, like we're done, but the Enterprise will live on, and that's telling the audience that Star Trek will live on. And then what we mentioned earlier, Dave, with the when he says instead of where no man has gone before, he corrects it to where no one had gone before. Which if that movie came out today, people would be outraged about that.
Stupid SJW Star Trek.
Yeah.
Now they can only invent that on Discovery and not on a movie per se.
But
I guess the Abrams movies had lots of TNA and more traditional fan servicey elements, so they weren't too freaked out about those either. But yeah, it's a good handoff. I believe at the time I was mildly annoyed at it because
Well, we've established before that college-age Dave wasn't as enlightened as modern Dave.
Yep. I thought I was like, it's too politically correct.
But just as Star Trek has like grown over the years, we've all grown over the years, and just like Star Trek is a very human story. It has its flaws, and just as we're a very human audience, and we have our flaws, but we can grow past them.
I didn't expect you were going to say something so deep at the end, Fatheree.
It's a deep movie, and I cry at the end watching this. From
that line, or is it another scene?
Just from that the whole ending sequence.
The sense of continuity and that this vision will
just
continue.
Having like a good farewell for the original series crew, because I love TOS. It's my second favorite Star Trek, and I love that it got like a pretty satisfying ending for me, anyways. And I wish that the TNG crew had gotten as good of a finale for their adventures, but. We got a TNG guy coming back later this year, so maybe Picard will at least get his big send-off.
It could be, and we'll see who else ends up showing up on there.
And part of my frustration with Star Trek Generations is that I do feel like they kind of botched the Kirk death that we'll get to next week, spoilers, and it kind of undercuts the ending of this movie a little bit, but we will be talking about that next week. So we're about to start talking about the TNG era movies. We have Generations coming up in a week, and that'll be followed by First Contact. So if you have any questions or thoughts on those movies, be sure to let us know. But we are going to have to go ahead and sign off now. We'll be back Sunday with Star Trek Generations. So until next time,
live long and prosper, y'all.
Thank all of you so much for checking out this installment of Tex-Trek. I hope you enjoyed it. Please be sure to like our YouTube videos and subscribe to our channel. Audio-only version of episodes are available at our website, www.tex-trek.com. Please check out our site, especially if you just want an audio-only podcast. We have that available for you. Y'all can also keep up with us online. You can follow us on Twitter, @TXTrek. Or you can check us out on Facebook at www.facebook.com/tex-trek. Please, by all means, let us know what you think by dropping a comment anywhere you see fit. We definitely want to hear your feedback. Let us know what you liked and what you would like to see more of, what you would like to see differently going forward. If you want to email me directly, go ahead. I can be reached at fathereeactual@tex-trek.com. Thank all y'all again. Take care.